Of all the woody crops, surely in the vine, in the vineyard, is where we have the most doubts, especially in the dryland vineyard, because these plants, these herbs, continue to compete with our commercial crop, with which we make money. Therefore, we are all interested in improving the soil, capturing more carbon, generating biodiversity, and preventing erosion. But we are not interested in having too much competition and seeing our productions plummet. As you know, as field entrepreneurs, we cannot afford this, at least in the field and definitely in the medium term. Today I want to talk to you about cover crops in the vineyard, because it is one of the crops where there is the most competition. It is one of the crops where there is the most risk. There are people who tell us no problem, relax, leave the cover crops, it's fine. I wouldn't trust this. The truth is that it's not very difficult, but we need to have some things clear, and the risk is there. All these plants are now dry, but for a long time they have been taking important and necessary resources from our vineyards, especially food, especially available space, air, and especially, very especially, water. And this is where all our doubts arise. What happens to us during these years of extreme drought? This is my farm. This is Canfon. It used to rain about 500 millimeters a year, but that was a long time ago. In recent years, we've dropped to 300. This year, from January until today, which is mid-August, it has rained approximately 120 milliliters, about no more. It's very little water, therefore we have to be very careful with the cover crops. In other videos, we tell you how to manage them, how to work with the brush cutter, with the roller, with the animals. There are many different techniques, but today in this video, I simply want to share my experience after all these years of working with cover crops, both in irrigated and dryland conditions. I know many farmers who say this is not possible. I know many farmers who have started working with cover crops to apply regenerative strategies, and because the new CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, provides a premium supplement to farmers who implement cover crops. And I know many farmers who have had bad experiences. Some have even had to plow, or have wanted to, or have opted to plow to solve the problem of water competition, something we do not consider on our farm. Basically, what happens with cover crops is that when we start to implement them in various ways, to sow them in different conditions and environments, or to let them grow, we do it on very poor soil, soil that has generally been tilled for many years to improve soil quality and fertility. And here, there is indeed a significant problem of competition. The soil and the entire system are not yet prepared to adequately feed the vines, produce grapes, and to feed the cover crops, neither to feed them nor to sufficiently give them water. We've had a very dry year. Last year it rained very little, and this year even less. In this area, we have hardly had any rain at all. But the cover crops are still there, and the vineyards keep on producing. And here lies the key to all of this. As farmers, we have to accept something very important. When we start with cover crops, we need to simultaneously begin a process of soil improvement. And at the beginning, there will be a drop in production. And this is the case, and whoever says otherwise, in quite dry climates already, because now we can say that we are in a very dry climate, and well, I don't quite believe it and would need to see it, okay? But even so, we are working with cover crops. There are some years when production can and usually does drop a bit, and this needs to be planned for. This needs to be taken into account. But for me, tilling the soil is not an option, because tilling the soil is starting over and not passing this toll. It's starting over again with this toll, because this toll will be there. Therefore, we have to plan that. For 1, 2, 3 years, our productions may decrease, especially if we coincide with a year as dry as this one. But deep down, I record this video as a message of optimism, because after this point, after this bump 2009, the cover crops work even in a vineyard without irrigation, even with 120 millimeters of rain so far this year. Therefore, a first recommendation is that we need to have patience. And this is not easy. We are risking our lives, our food, our money. That's why careful planning is required. And if different actions are needed, choosing a very good cover crop, planting it at the right time, managing it correctly, and being prepared, because if the year is dry, as has been the case, our sprouting, our production can be affected. But let's take a closer look at this dryland vineyard. This is a relatively old vineyard located in the beautiful countryside. It is a white Grenache and it has many faults. For many years, we have had many various problems with wood diseases here, and unfortunately have lost some vines. Even so, the cover, although now dry and brittle from exposure to air over time, in this vineyard we have been using cover crops for about 8 years. 8 years ago, we decided to stop tilling the soil, and it's true that in the first few years the sprouting was a bit shorter and we had less production. But this year, and this is what I want to show you, we have the sprouting, the number of leaves, and the production, not only as good as we had before when we tilled the soil, but even better. We have had very good productions for a few years now. 2001, this is just a few days away from harvest. Here we have incredibly highly productive averages of around 8,000 kilos per hectare, and in fact, that is what we are going to successfully achieve this year with so little water, which is quite remarkable, because after all this time, our soil has been substantially greatly enriched with organic matter. Therefore, we can make better use of the water, the very little water that rains here, with a lot of decomposing organic matter, which is extremely crucial, and this is one of the keys. If we till, we will go backwards, losing part of the valuable organic matter we've gained, and we'll have to start over again. Here you can see these beautiful grape varieties, which are also very healthy, nutritious, and delicious. We have few phytosanitary problems. Since it rains little, we have few issues with fungi and diseases. But the truth is, we actually don't have problems with alopecia or other diseases and pests because we have a lot of biodiversity here. Indeed, we definitely don't. We can't ask more from this vineyard because even when we were truly working the land, it already had this appearance. Indeed, actually. Therefore, here is indeed a first message of truly positive outlook. Once you actually get past this rough patch, cover crops work, even in years where it practically doesn't rain at all. This is another vineyard located right next to it, in this particular case, Cabernet. We have very good sprouting. We have exactly the same sprouting as we did when we were working with conventional farming methods, but I will even go as far as to tell you that since we have started working with cover crops and have successfully gotten past this rough patch, we have more production. Look, with 120 millimeters of rainfall this year, there is good sprouting in the fields, leading to healthy growth. We are definitely very happy with the production process, which could be improved. It can always indeed be absolutely better, but this vineyard has not stopped even with so little water. And this is the important message I want to convey to you. It is indeed possible to work with cover crops, and it works effectively to use cover crops even with precipitation levels that are almost like a desert climate. We have successfully pushed the vineyard forward, and the vineyard has significantly moved forward. In fact, this amount of grapes, which for some areas might be considered little, but for us is more than adequate, is more than we had when we worked the soil without cover crops. This Cabernet is slowly and gradually changing color over time. Here, in this vineyard, we will harvest it in approximately a month and a half. It is surely one of the grape varieties that ripen much later here in our specific area, in our denomination. And now the cover crops are completely dry, completely devoid of moisture, but they still safeguard and protect the soil. They keep on improving. Soil temperature is cooler in 2001 than in areas without cover crops. If it rains a little, which it will someday, the plants here will sprout again, turn green, start capturing carbon, and perform photosynthesis 2001. And this is another example I wanted to share with you. This is a vineyard under irrigation, same climate, same situation, same soils, very little rain as well, but here we have the subsurface irrigation system, which is like having a parachute for years like this. Still, irrigation is not the same as rain. And here we could have had more sprouting, surely more production, but this vineyard estate is indeed 4 years old. We can't ask for much more, and we are really very satisfied. Absolutely delighted with the production it has. Extremely delighted. Here we will raise the average of other years by implementing new techniques and strategies. We haven't irrigated much because this isn't really an irrigation, it's a dry land with water support. But really, even with the little water we've applied, because we also have irrigation restrictions this year, on top of that, the subsurface irrigation system, which is designed to be highly efficient, works very well. And with a little support water, we have a correct sprout, also working with the cover crops. Additionally, the cover crops help in retaining soil moisture and improving soil health, which further supports the growth of the main crops. And if it definitely works in the drylands, it obviously works in the irrigation as well. And here we had little sprouting at the beginning because we pruned very late to reduce the risk of frosts and had very little growth by the time of flowering. In fact, this is a moment when the plant starts to slow down a bit, but the truth is that it has recovered significantly. Ultimately, we observed that the late pruning was a strategic decision. We are delighted with how things are going, especially with just a few days left before harvest. And we continue to have no doubt that cover crops are one of the best tools we can use, even in crops where there is so much competition, such as in the case of vineyards. In conclusion, working with cover crops is not only possible, but it is even better and more beneficial. But just as tilling the soil, which is often essential and highly beneficial, doesn't have to be a strict dogma, neither do cover crops. Sometimes better to start step by step. Leave cover crops in one row and not in the next. Let 2 or 3 years pass. And when the row with the cover crops is more regenerated and can handle everything, implement the cover crops in the other row. There are many different strategies, various methods and approaches, and I insist, experiencing a challenging and tough year is normal, and I fully and completely understand all the concerns and uncertainties this can generate, but I firmly assure you that after this point, it is entirely possible to work effectively, and you can work perfectly with cover crops even in extremely dry years. And under no circumstances would I seriously consider going back and cultivating again in detail these vineyards and these soils again, because the carbon I have achieved, which is what absolutely helps me maintain these growths and productions, I do not want to lose it at all.